Yeah, well, look, woke has certainly made inroads. It's impossible to deny that. But here's the great paradox. You say in your book, and I quote, few people describe themselves as woke. There's no political parties promising voters more woke. And yet in Australia, as I suspect in the UK, the woke, non-woke divide has really become the main fault line in politics. The old divides, left versus right, workers versus bosses, blue collar versus white collar, unions versus bosses, whatever. They don't really cut it anymore. Indeed, at the last election here, Joanna, back in May, we had a number of independents elected to Parliament whose sole purpose, it seemed to me, was to uphold woke ideology, doing more to fight climate change, being nice to LGBTQ people, giving recognition in the Constitution of Indigenous people, you know the kind of thing. But at the same time, the main parties are divided over exactly those kind of things. So am I overstating it? Is that now the new fault line in politics?
No, I think you're absolutely correct. And certainly this is something that we very much see in the UK as well. People are probably aware of the leadership race currently underway to be the next leader of the Conservative Party, the next British Prime Minister. One of the front runners in that campaign, no longer in it, but was up until very recently one of the front runners, a woman called Penny Mordaunt. She has essentially been a trans rights activist in the British Parliament for the past few years. She was one of the main people pushing through the Gender Recognition Act, trying to make it easier for people to change their gender just on the say-so without having to undergo surgery, seek out doctor's appointments, medical referrals or anything like that. And she did come very, very close to being our next Prime Minister. So I think you're absolutely right that this completely transcends left-right divides, but also I think you're right that this is the real new dividing point in society right now. I think some people recognise that a little bit, but what worries me is that far more people do still think that these are just trivial issues, that the culture wars is somehow not important, and really we need to kind of wish all of this away so we can get on to talking about real politics. Unfortunately, I think this is real politics for the time being. This is where the most important political debates are taking place.
Yeah, well, let's look at some of the things that woke has done. They've radically redefined racism, as you explain in your book. I mean, my generation, and probably yours too, we were taught that skin pigmentation was almost the least important thing about you. And now it's the most important. It's the thing that defines you and defines your life trajectory. And all this has been overlaid with this narrative of anti-colonialism and the profound conviction that countries like Britain, the US and Australia are not just flawed in some ways, but evil and illegitimate. I just want to show you, I wouldn't normally bore a guest with an extract from the Australian Senate, which could be a pretty dull pace, but this week there was an incident, a senator with Lydia Thorpe, an Indigenous senator who represents the Greens. We'll play the video now.
I, Sovereign Lydia Thorpe, do solemnly and sincerely affirm and declare that I will be faithful and I bear true allegiance to the colonising Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Senator Thorpe.
The colonising Queen Elizabeth II. What did you make of that performance?
Well, it seems a kind of slightly odd place to be making that particular protest. But I think the kind of the trashing of tradition, of institutions, and ultimately of history, of national history in whatever way it is, presented, I think have all the hallmarks of woke thinking.